On this episode, we're joined by Carrie Ferenac, president and co-founder of Convention News Television, a full-service digital media company headquartered in Orlando, Florida. We're live. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Association Marketing Show.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation and diving into your expertise in video and video strategy. It's so critical and important for associations and event organizers and just companies in general. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation. But just to kind of level set and kick us off, can you please tell us a little bit about your backgrounds, personally, professionally, how you started CNTV, which kind of got you into the event association world, and what your organization does today?
Sure, absolutely. No, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here. It's interesting. This is a second life for me. My first life was in television news. So I worked in broadcast television for more than a decade, mostly in Orlando at the NBC affiliate here, and loved it. And left sort of kicking and screaming because I was a hardcore news junkie. And I was freelancing, wasn't sure what I was doing. I only left because I had had two of my three children. And, I met Marcelo Zalessi, who ended up being my business partner. But we met when we were freelancing. He had also left news. And we were working for an association at a trade show. And we were creating happy face videos and some content, but we realized that nobody was really doing that for the industry specifically. At that time, we were working with a trade publication in the aviation space, and we were like a video show daily. And that was really cool, and I so appreciate that because it helped us get into the industry. And then we hired a gentleman by the name of Bill Pieper, and he started and ran the Orlando CVB for about 26 years. Some people watching might know Bill.
Okay.
And he really helped us understand our value for associations. So that's how we kind of got started, fell into this industry. And now we create video content, live streaming, and digital media, virtual platforms for associations and trade show organizers.
Awesome. You kind of got into it a little bit there, but maybe you could just elaborate the kinds of services that you provide to your clients. I know, again, like video and production is your specialty, but that in the last decade plus, you've expanded your scope of services as you've been working more and more. So maybe you could just briefly talk about that. What's the kind of spectrum of services that you offer?
Sure, absolutely. So we were doing live streaming and virtual before virtual was cool, meaning before COVID.
Yeah.
We were starting to live stream from studios on site at events around the country. And that really helped us make the switch to virtual. So now we do not only video production, but a lot of live streaming, remote interviews, education session capture, any kind of promotional videos. We also do entire virtual events. So we have a platform now, which is really exciting. It's called CNTV Now. So for hybrid events, we can actually offer a holistic solution where the platform and the production all comes from one vendor. So we think that's going to be helpful to our clients.
Super compelling. Yeah. And it sounds like it's video for all different kinds of applications, right? It's educational content, but I'm assuming, video obviously has a very strong marketing application. But education, marketing, those seem to be kind of two really key areas that video can be used for associations. Any others kind of come to mind as like major areas of applications, maybe like in the sponsorship realm or others?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you nailed it with the sponsorship component. We really like to think that once we start working with one area of an association, we then can spread very quickly to lots of different departments, right? So you mentioned education, marketing, sponsorships are huge. And this gives exhibitors and sponsors a way to deliver their message in a visually compelling way.
Right.
I'm here in a digital studio, as you can see behind me, and we can create year-round content. So then that helps a lot with membership engagement, for example. We also do a lot of production for advocacy. So when associations have their day on the Hill, we can be there to cover it or to create videos telling members what their association's doing for them. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a ton of different kinds of applications, all within one association, as a matter of fact.
The Association Marketing Show is brought to you by Feathr, the all-in-one digital marketing toolkit built just for associations. To learn more about our tools and services, check us out at feathr.co. That's FEATHR.co. Yeah. I think that's such an important thing to understand. I think typically, especially for an organization that is not kind of deep into video as like a core competency for their association, when they think about video production work, they probably think about the most obvious and often expensive high production versions of video, right? Like some kind of comprehensive association overview video that lives on your website homepage or something, which is going to be pretty complex to produce, have a lot of stakeholders involved with it, probably take a long time and a lot of money to do well. Or something like an event highlight reel, which is maybe a little bit simpler to pull off, but also relatively complex, I'd assume. But there's a lot of other applications for video, more kind of micro-pointed, simpler applications for video that are still very impactful for an association in terms of furthering their mission, in terms of educating audience members or actual association members themselves, in terms of sponsorship applications, marketing applications, like you've been saying. And so like understanding that, oh yeah, there is a broad spectrum of ways that video can be used that have different levels of complexity and cost is really key. Otherwise it can just seem like video is out of reach, because video in my mind is, you know, some kind of really expensive, heavy lift, maybe bureaucratic even thing, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, it's almost crazy for me to believe that when we started, we were doing 30-minute newscasts for websites, which now, you know, seems almost crazy, right? And we started having to break that down and change as social media came online, as YouTube came online. And so now, you know, you might do a video highlight, like you said, but you should also be pulling testimonials out of that. If you have a roving crew on site that's creating highlights of your keynote session, ask them why they should also be members of your association. And those little testimonials can be extremely valuable. We've done case studies for sponsors, for example, or for exhibitors about what those exhibitors are doing the rest of the year, right? And then that creates content for engagement throughout the year. I think there are a lot of ways to use all those stakeholders that are in one place at one time for the annual meeting, capture as much of it as possible, and then you can use it multiple times, get as much bang for the buck as possible, and use it throughout the year. And I think that we're going to see more and more of that now that the virtual world has become a reality thanks to the pandemic. So I think that really members are going to expect to be engaged and to have content delivered to them more than just the 3 days a year as it has been in the past.
Yeah, completely. One of the questions that I had for you was, and you've started to touch on it, so I want to ask it now, is basically your recommendations and experience of the most cost-efficient way for associations to get into video production. And you've mentioned this idea here of, you know, especially when live events were still a thing and now we're kind of coming back into the picture more and more. That being like having a crew on site at a live event because of like all of the types, like the variety of content that you can get when your attendees, members, prospects, exhibitors, thought leaders, speakers, et cetera, all in the same place, the whole kind of variety and the shot list you can build and all that kind of stuff. Could you talk about that idea a little bit more as like a very effective, cost-effective entry point into the world of video, and like just how much content you can get from just a few days worth of work? But also, if anything else comes to mind as like quick wins when it comes to video production for an association that you've helped to execute and that you've learned about, just to give people who are listening actionable ways to get into video. What I'm hoping to avoid is this idea of like, yes, video is important, and like at a high level, I believe that, but like what are ways that I can get started in the next few months that are cost efficient? That's what I'm trying to get at a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, especially now, because I think the days of pulling out the hard drive from your 2019 show and dusting it off, they're over. I've created this term called COVID cringe, right? Which is when you see video of people all smashed together or eating at the buffet and you're just like, you want to break out in hives because you haven't done that in so long.
Yeah.
And you know it's not the greatest idea right now.
Yeah.
So I think every association needs to have at least a small crew on site for their next face-to-face meeting, which I believe are coming back with a vengeance, for the record.
Yeah.
But at the face-to-face meeting, to capture that video of them meeting safely, to capture more socially distant B-roll, as we would say, which is that raw video that you can use in so many ways. And you can have a small crew. You can send maybe 2 or 3 people to an event and have them capture not only B-roll or video, but also sound bites. You know, for me, the associations have so many unbelievably compelling stories to tell. And so the annual meeting is often the place to capture those stories. right? So talk to the members about why they're there. What are the benefits? What's the return on their investment? Why do the exhibitors come? What are the exhibitors doing for the industry the rest of the year? And then those sound bites can be used throughout the year to create individual videos.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of our folks here at CNTV have news backgrounds. And so we tend to think of it as storytelling, right? And there's a character in those stories. And the characters are all at the annual meeting, right? So it doesn't have to be hard news. It doesn't have to be,
Right.
you know, it can be fun. The style can be more fun. But just knowing that that is where you're going to capture all those people, I think is really, really important.
Yeah.
And to add to it, you can do this, right? I mean, now people are comfortable with Zoom. People
Yeah.
are comfortable being online. We've done thousands of remote recordings over the past year and a half. So you can always add to it or do an interview this way and then tell a story and cover it. But to me, if you're going to tell stories about your members, your exhibitors, all your stakeholders, capture them when they're at the annual meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, yes, you know, this can capture video just fine, right? Nice camera. You can get
Carrie's
some video.
holding up an iPhone for everybody who's listening to the audio version.
Oh, right. Sorry. So this is my iPhone. I mean, you can capture some video. Sure. They capture great video. What an iPhone has a hard time doing is capturing those interviews and capturing those stories and hearing from people about why they do what they do. And that's really at the heart of an association, right? Is inspiring these like-minded people. And that to me is why you need a professional crew on site to get those interviews, to hear those stories, and then to put them together.
Yeah.
And it's cost effective, like you said. It doesn't have to be a big, massive crew to start. You can start by capturing the material and then piecing it together throughout the year.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that seems like a, I don't know if this term is taken wrongly sometimes, but a no-brainer of of a tactic, right? Yeah. Well, so one thing, obviously, that has become much more prominent and kind of popular in the last year is virtual events, right? And I think especially in the beginning, as we were all figuring this out as an industry for the first time, there was, I guess, lower expectations, or I should say more tolerance for something that wasn't pulled off kind of like in an immaculate manner from a production standpoint, or from like a hosting and pacing and having an awesome MC who's like tying every session together, and even from like a virtual event platform and technology standpoint. I think people were just really, really eager to hear from industry leaders about what was going on in their industries, especially in the response to the pandemic, and that information was all important. And simply having experts in a given industry talking about how, you know, the industry was responding to the pandemic, that was compelling in and of itself to get people to show up and get people to stay engaged, because again, the demand for the information, real-time, up-to-date information was so high. I think what I've observed in, you know, as time has gone on since the pandemic and the long lockdowns began, is that tolerance has kind of gone down, and the demand for higher production value, more tightly designed and produced experiences in the form of virtual events has become greater and greater. That's become more and more important. And that is much more difficult to pull off just inherently. So one, just kind of like, what's your sense around that? And as you've been helping associations pull off these more higher production value, kind of, again, like neatly designed and produced virtual events, what have you learned about that have been kind of the really important things to get right from a production or from a hosting pacing standpoint that have taken events, you know, to that next level in terms of the attendee experience? What comes to mind when I say all that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's interesting. I mean, for a virtual event versus an in-person event, the ability to click away is so tempting, right? So for those of you watching video, like my email's right there and YouTube's right there, right? And for those of you listening to podcasts, you know, when you're watching a virtual event, that email button is one click away, right? Social media is one click away. And so I think that virtual events have an even higher responsibility to try and engage the audience. For me, that always means having an actual human being as a host, as a virtual MC, because we're human beings by nature, and we connect with other human beings. right? And so if I come to this virtual platform, like you said, the expectation is now higher. I'm going to need someone there to walk me through what's going to happen. Where am I going? Because if you don't warn me and kind of prepare me and take me to the next spot, I'm probably going to be gone. I got too many things happening, right?
Hmm.
So you've got to engage that virtual audience. And I think what we're seeing is that the education piece of it is still working online.
Yeah.
People can come online to get continuing education, certifications, all kinds of things like that. I think that's working. I think the thing that everyone is just craving to get back to in person is the actual trade show, especially trade shows that are very tactical, where you need to touch, feel, see, even taste. Think of natural restaurants, right? I mean,
Hmm.
how can you do a virtual trade show for restaurants where you need to taste the actual products, right?
Right.
So I think that's why I really believe face to face is coming back, but it's got to be engaging. One of the things when we created our platform that we really focused on was the networking tool. And that networking tool, it allows for meetings, chats, video, face-to-face video meetings,
Hmm.
because eventually if you're just typing in a chat, you're going to run out of real estate. You're going to run out of, of zip, right? You got to talk to real people and see their face a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think that networking tool, there's still some potential for that. But in my mind, the virtual world just has this much higher level of need for engagement because it is so easy to click away or get called away by something happening around you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It sounds like, in terms of like some specifics, that having a host is important. How do you balance, having a host who's like an actual, like an expert and a peer, versus
Mm-hmm.
having somebody who has like hosting skills, who's a professional host? Like, can you mix and match? Can you have somebody who's professional MC, but also somebody who has those qualities and like is very personable and engaging and dynamic, but who's actually an industry peer and recognized in the space? What are some of the ways that you've seen that be pulled off?
Yeah, I think it runs the gamut, to be honest with you. Sometimes an association might have someone who has on camera experience, or they're
Right.
really compelling and they may be a perfect candidate for that. What I usually recommend, though, is bring in a professional, bring in someone who's been on camera, who knows how to do it, who is comfortable if something goes wrong, because you have to consider that as well,
Mm.
right? And then let them always interview the industry expert.
Mm.
I'm an NBC girl. I worked at an NBC station for a long time. So I think about Lester Holt and Nightly News, right? Lester's the anchor. He's the guy, right? But then he brings in Dr. Torres for all medical stories. And Dr. Torres is the expert on all things medical. And so often they'll be on site, on the desk, or online together. And Lester can ask that person for insight, for tips, for a little bit more of a deeper dive, right? Than he might be able to give because he doesn't have the medical background.
Yeah.
And so that can be applied to associations, right? So maybe we work with IAPA here in Orlando, for example. So maybe we have an on-camera host who's a professional host, and maybe they're interviewing someone from the attractions industry who can offer a lot more insight on that specific industry and
Yeah.
what's happening to those folks. So that's
Right.
how I think that it can really work, actually. That's at least my thought.
Yeah. Cool. What are some of the other things that you've helped to do in terms of making virtual education sessions that much more engaging, so that the temptation to, command W or control W and close your window or close your tab
Right.
is kept at bay? I know you've mentioned in our prep call, you were talking about the effectiveness of pre-recording to give you that opportunity to edit in sound effects, visual effects, transitions, other kinds of things. But what are some of the ways that you've helped clients crack that like engaging video-based education code? And what have been some of those components?
Sure. I mean, number one is make them shorter. I think
Yeah.
if you're going to be online, know that that person is sitting at their desk at home, probably with a kid and a dog and 47 other things going on, right? So keep them shorter, number one. Number two, I do believe in pre-recording. Some. Live TV is in my DNA, and I
Hmm.
love live because it adds to that excitement. But I recommend pre-recording at least some
Okay.
sessions
Okay.
because number one, you have somewhere to go, and number two, what you pointed out is you can produce them. That means, if it's an awards ceremony, you can add music, you can add red drapes, you can add applause, you can even add shots from the Emmys audience, and make it a little kitschy and fun.
Yeah.
Where if you're live, you can do some of that, but it's a lot of, hey, it's me talking to you, and here's my award, and now you talk. Where
Yeah.
I just, even music, think about how impactful music can be. You know, in the tips for this podcast, one of the tips you give is turn your music on before you start, get hyped up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know how music can have such an impact. And I think if you edit music into a pre-recorded session, that can help.
Yeah.
I also think it's vital to work in breaks. One of my friends, Janet Sperstad, she teaches on the neuroscience of learning, and we just don't pay attention to that enough.
Mm.
We've got to get people to move, to stretch, to stand up, to be engaging, to
Mm-hmm.
answer polls, to take questionnaires. Even if you just ask the audience, show of hands, how many of you have experienced it? Just by raising my hand,
Mm.
the blood flow kicks the dopamine, and all of a sudden I'm more engaged,
Oh man,
right?
I'm raising my hands now. Can I?
Right?
What if I raise both hands?
Five, a high five is like a hit of dopamine, right? All of a sudden you feel like you're energized again. And people are
James, high
doing
five.
high five.
Bam.
And those things may sound simple, but it's amazing to me. I was working with someone the other day, and they had a 3 hour block of sessions. And I'm like, folks, we got to break this up. You know, I mean, you're going to lose people.
Yeah.
So I think the production element is key. I think breaks are key. I think thinking about how our brains work is key.
Yeah.
And having that human being connection, whether they're live or recorded, a human being to interact and to guide you.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a TV producer many, many years ago, they used to say that at the beginning, you have to grab the viewer and drag them slowly through your program.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that for virtual events, or frankly, for in-person events too. You got to tell people where to go.
Yeah.
If they get lost or they can't figure out their next session, they're back on Facebook or they're back on Instagram. You know what I mean? They're moving on.
Yeah. That is sometimes overlooked, where it's like all the energy goes into the sessions, the individual sessions themselves, and not into planning the relationship between the sessions and into helping people navigate their time and navigate their days with you.
Right.
Yeah. That's a very salient point.
We use the term the user experience all the time, because I'm like, okay, when I log on, and in fact, for all of our platforms, before we go live, we try it out. So, and we'll have somebody who's not on that team try it out, because the person who created the platform has this curse of knowledge, right? So they know where it is. The meeting planner knows what's coming up next.
Right.
But if I'm a random attendee, what is my experience going to be? Am I going to understand where to go? Am I going to understand what to click? Do I understand how to network and where to find somebody that I might want to look for? Those kinds of questions, I think, like you said, are sometimes overlooked, and they may be the most important thing we do.
Yep.
Really.
Yep. Yeah. That's a great point. So one thing I wanted to ask you is about just kind of like recent examples of very successful video projects that you've done for customers, maybe even outside of virtual event content production. And what I'm trying to do here is like get our listeners to think maybe more creatively about ways that video can be used at their organizations, in the form of examples of anything that kind of comes to mind for you. And I'm just wondering if saying that prompts any recent experiences or recent memories.
Yeah, I mean, many, to be honest with you, but one comes to mind. We were working with risk managers at RIMS, and one of the sponsors was FM Global, which is an insurance company. And they have a lovely booth on site, you know, and it's fantastic. But they actually have a headquarters where they simulate earthquakes, tornadoes, and hurricanes and fires, literally. And so instead of going to their booth on site, you know, an insurance booth, and doing an interview there, we worked with them to go to their headquarters in advance. And we captured the explosion and the fire and the tornado and the, you know, and that was so visual and became such a successful thing that was then shown on site and shown online. But I think that's the kind of thing that comes to mind. That's a better way for them to tell their story than just necessarily to have someone come by their booth, right?
Yep.
And so I think it's all about trying to make sure that we're working with, whether it's members or the association or lawmakers, if we're talking about advocacy or whatever it is, to make sure that we're delivering their story in the most compelling way.
Right.
When we did, I worked with Nicole Bowman at IAEE right during the pandemic, and we did a virtual exhibitions day for the trade show industry, right?
Yeah.
And instead of just having everybody on Zoom, we created videos. So all along the way, we would have a video to toss to about how you can tweet your congressman or woman, right? And then we did another video on how to be a successful advocate, right? And so those videos became much more compelling than just talking heads the whole time. And they lived on and on and on. You can go to IAE's website right now and see those videos. Like have a shelf life for some period of time.
Yeah.
So it's creating that content that's really engaging people. I think that's absolutely vital.
Yeah. Shout out to Nicole. She was guest number 1 on the Association Marketing
Oh,
Show.
was she? Oh, nice. Nicole. Very nice. I did
Yeah.
not even realize that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, she was.
That's cool.
Cool. Carrie, anything else come to mind in terms of just advice and guidance that you would give to association marketers listening, whether that relates to video or virtual event production, or just you have so much experience in the space working with meeting planners, working with marketers, working with executives at associations, just anything that comes to mind, just kind of like open mic, that you would like to say to our listeners.
I think one of the things to me is that your partners matter, right? The vendors that you work with really matter. And number two, talk to them about the strategy. Talk to them about your goals and what success looks like. I think all too often we sort of get caught up in the logistics or caught up in the technology, and we're not talking about the bigger picture and what success looks like. How many people do you really want to have at your meeting? How can we reach those people? What's really important to your exhibitors? Is it name recognition or is it a product demo? Those are very different things and different video styles to produce to accomplish those goals. So I think for me, the most important thing is, think of your video production company in our end, or whatever vendor it is, as a true partner.
Right.
And I think that's really important because it's hard. We can create videos all day long, but we can really create more successful content if we know what you're trying to achieve.
Yes. I love that point. We say the same thing all the time. In our case, we're a marketing technology platform that works with a lot of associations and event organizers. And I've given this advice before to other association marketers that is even slightly stronger, which is like demand that your partners are able to have that level of conversation with you. In other words, if your partner comes in and like the only level of conversation that they're comfortable having is at the very micro tactical level of like, what frame rate do you want, or like things like that. And anytime you try to push in the direction of like, hey, here's what we're trying to accomplish, here's the end goal, like you were saying, here's what success looks like.
Right.
And like that, there's like almost like a lack of appetite or resistance to talk at that level. You might be setting yourself up for a poor experience. And I think what one of the things that might distinguish a good partner from one that may not be successful for you is that should like light up the partner. That should bring them to life and maybe even bring out better solutions from them based upon their expertise and experience, of ways that you can better achieve that goal given that broader context that you've now shared with them. And so that point that you just made, I think is really important, because to some degree, whatever video production as a skill set, that's all over the place. It's kind of table stakes. Same for us. Like marketing technology is widely available. To some degree, it's table stakes. What is not is that expertise and that kind of commitment to the strategic goals of your organization and the ability to actually help you creatively achieve those goals by applying whatever the underlying, service or technology is, video production in your case, marketing and ad tech in our case. And so I just double underline, italicize, bold at that point. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm energized by what you said. I think that is so very true. And I think especially now, and I would be careful what I say, but there are so many new technology companies that sort of came out of the woodwork, if you will. Yeah. And I think as we move forward, people need to understand the association space. Feathr's been around for a long time. CNTV's been around for a long time. We need to make sure that associations are working with clients who understand what they're going through. Yeah. Right. And you're right. I can go hire a fantastic videographer, but I want to hire people who understand the space and understand what our clients are going through. Yeah. We tell a story, Marcel and I tell a story that, without Bill Pieper, originally we would be a guy with a camera and a girl with a dream. and that's it. And the reason is because he's the one who understood the association space, and he helped us appreciate that. Right. And that was more important than any camera we were going to buy or any frame rate we're going to use or any uploading service we have, whatever. Like none of that is as important as understanding the space and understanding the relationship between our clients and our company. And I think you guys would agree with that too. So
absolutely. Cool.
inspiring.
Yeah, very well said. Carrie, I have a closing question that I always ask, which is, at this stage, with all of the experience that you have, what do you wish you could go back in time and tell young Carrie just getting started in your career?
2020 is going to suck, so get ready for that. That would be going to be busy, Carrie. Get ready. I think so. For me, my first career was TV news. And I had this incredible platform. I was a senior executive producer at an NBC affiliate in the top 20 market. And I did not appreciate the impact of the exhibitions and events space. And so I think if I could go back and tell young Carrie something, it would be to appreciate that space and to know what kind of an impact you could really have. Because I didn't even know this existed. I mean, I knew there was a convention center in Orlando, of course, but I didn't really understand associations or anything. Yeah. And I didn't realize that the skill set I had in TV news could apply to something like this. So, it took me a long time to leave news, and I don't regret it for a single second. I loved every moment of it. Yeah. But I think I would tell myself there are other applications for this skill set. Right. And to start looking for that, because I really believe that. I believe that storytelling, that quick format, that efficiency works really well for the association space and for the exhibition space. So I think that's what I would tell myself.
That's a good one. Cool.
That, and always go to the lobby bar, because that's where the real business gets.
Second tip thrown in there, just for good measure.
Just for fun. That's
awesome.
Right.
Carrie, well, thank you so much for joining today. I feel like all of the points that you've given today are really practical, helpful points, and also timely for what associations are going through right now. And it's not a topic that we've really spent that much time talking about so far. We haven't had somebody with such depth of expertise in video and video production for associations come on. And so I'm really happy that we had a chance to talk about it a little bit here today. I'm excited for the response from our listeners. Yeah,
me too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. I'm energized by this conversation, and I'm passionate for the industry, so I always love talking about it. Thank you.
Same. Of course. We'll stay in touch, Carrie.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks so much again to Carrie for joining the podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with Carrie, you can find her on LinkedIn by searching Carrie Ferenac. That's CarrieFerenac. And if you'd like to learn more about the media and production services that Convention News Television offers, go to cntvnow.com.